Let's talk winter layering. Hey, it's Squidly. Everyone wants the lowest possible pack weight, but in the wintertime, that can be a little bit more difficult because you're carrying heavier gear, heavier equipment, and more clothes. And the clothes, that's the side of it that I want to deal with today. What do I do for winter layering? One of the issues with layering is controlling not just your body temperature, but controlling overheating to the point where you begin to sweat. Because in the wintertime, sweating and just basically getting wet is your enemy. And so part of what I'm going to discuss here is with the layering system is how to layer in such a way that you minimize sweating. My winter layering is going to be different from everyone else's because, well, everyone has a different perception of what cold is and what comfortable is, and everyone is going to be hiking in different environments. I'm hiking in the deep south in the wintertime mostly, so the temperatures that we get here in the wintertime are probably closer to what you might think of as late 3 season or early 3 season anywhere else. So just keep that in mind, but these are some ideas for winter layering, and this is what I do. What you see here is basically the outfit that I wear during the day on a hiking trip. Through the course of the day, if I start to warm up, and generally speaking I do, I will have to stop and the leggings will come off and I'm just hiking in shorts. But if it's a really, really cold day, the leggings stay on, as long as I'm not sweating. What you don't see in this outfit is that I'm actually wearing 2 shirts. They're identical, except that one's long sleeve and one's short sleeve. And when I start my day, I start with the short sleeve on bottom, so that as the day warms, if I start to warm and begin to sweat, I can stop and take off this top layer, take off the long sleeve shirt. So even in the wintertime, I might get all the way down to shoes, socks, shorts, and short sleeve t-shirt. If it's a really cold day, I might have a fleece on. The advantage to a fleece while you're hiking is that they're pretty airy. They breathe really well, and even though it's adding some warmth, it breathes well enough that in really cold temperatures, it can still help keep you from sweating so bad. But if I've got it on and I start to warm up through the day, it's got to come off because I cannot sweat. That is your enemy, sweating. So I have 2 different fleeces here. I would never take both of these. I'll just take one. One is pretty light and the other one's a little bit heavy. In the winter, I'll also take a pair of gloves. These are more like what you would think of as glove liners. They're just fleece gloves. And I'll take these mostly for in camp, and I'll get to that in a minute. But sometimes while I'm hiking, one of the ways that I can kind of regulate my temperature is to not wear so much on my core, but if I am still a little chilly, is I can put something on my hands and on my head. And so these gloves are ideal for that. And again, they're fleece, so they are breathable. In addition to the fleece gloves, if there's some weather, if it's raining, I take a pair of these are nitrile chemical gloves that I can wear over the fleece gloves to keep them dry. Okay, so all of that brings us to later in the day. When I get to camp, one of the first things that I like to do is get out of what I think of as my hiking clothes. I also think of them as my sweaty clothes. If they have gotten sweaty, I'm definitely going to come out of them because now they're wet. They're not going to do much to insulate me. And so the chances of getting cool in camp are greater because I'm wearing wet clothes. So I'm going to get out of these if they're wet. And even if they're not wet, I'm going to get out of them at least temporarily because I'm going to put on what I call my camp or my sleeping clothes. Really, I call them my sleeping clothes. And it's a thin thermal top, and I have a matching thermal bottom, which I use sometimes, but basically the tights have kind of replaced those thermal bottoms. And I have a pair of fleece pants. These are from Montbell. I've had them for forever. Really like these. These are great for sleeping clothes and for wearing in camp. One addition through the course of the day is the neck gaiter or buff. I have a couple of these. This is the one I usually use more than any other. And if for nothing else, when it's cool outside, you can wear it just around your neck like this, and it acts to help keep you warm, help insulate you a little bit. And it doesn't seem like it would do much, but I have found that when you're just slightly chilled, wearing this around your neck can do a lot. One thing that I struggle with is, especially when it's cool and windy, is my ears. And so what I'll do is I'll just pop it up over my head like this, and it'll insulate my ears a little bit to keep them out of the wind and keep them a little bit warmer. More on the buff in just a minute. Once I'm in camp and I've gotten into my sleeping clothes, one addition to my sleeping clothes is sleeping socks. Now, my sleeping socks are important because through the course of the day, I may have had stream crossings where I got my feet wet, got my socks wet, my shoes are wet, and I'm not going to stay in those for the evening. One, it's just dangerous, but two, it would be really uncomfortable, and then it would also add moisture into my sleeping bag. That's a big no-no. So I'm going to keep dry socks. Through the course of every day, you want to have, if you only have 2 pair of socks that you're interchanging, then you want to have one pair on your feet and the other pair either dry in your pack or drying on the outside of your pack. So once I'm in camp, it's time to add another layer on top of my sleeping clothes. Now, if through the course of the day, if I did not do enough sweating that my clothes are wet, I will probably put these on over my sleeping clothes, just because it adds some extra layers and it works better for keeping me warm. But once I'm in camp, definitely as the temperature begins to drop, as the sun sets, I'm going to add either the fleece that I started out with. I'll keep the fleece on or put it on in order to add an extra layer, or the puffy. But it's great for in camp in the evening or in the morning, which I'll get to in just a second. One thing I haven't mentioned up to this point is headgear. Now, headgear is an issue through the course of the day, in camp, at night while I'm sleeping. It's all of that. And because it's wintertime, it means it's also hunting season. And so a lot of places where I hike is also multi-use, where it's also available to hunters. And so I try to incorporate a little bit of orange because I don't want to be mistaken as a deer. And so I have an orange ball cap that I can wear, or an orange beanie. The thing about both of these pieces of headgear is that I can still use my buff to pull up over both of these to keep my ears warm if the temperature is dropping or if it's really windy. So here's a pro tip. Once I get into my sleeping bag at night and I'm ready to go to bed, one of the things I do, because I wear my sleeping bag like a quilt, I don't generally zip it up with the hood up over my head, so I wear a beanie, and once I've got the beanie on my head, I use the buff up over it, and it keeps it from sliding off my head at night. Okay, now that brings us to the morning. And once I get to the morning, this is the coldest part of the day, usually, and so now it's time to, as I get ready to get up, put all of these clothes on my body for the few minutes that I'm in camp, eating breakfast, having my coffee, packing everything up before I get ready to hit the trail. And so before I put any of the, and I've got all these piled up over here, but before I put any of this stuff back on my body, I pull the clothes that I'm about to pull on back under the sleeping bag with me and get those clothes warm before I try to put them on my body. So finally in the morning, I've had breakfast, I've had my coffee, I've been packing up camp. Hopefully that's been warming me up. I'm wearing all of these extra layers to try to stay warm while I do that. And now it's time to come out of these layers. And when I do, I'm thinking of 2 things. One is I'm going to start, and I know we've heard this before, I'm going to start cold because I call it the half-mile challenge. That's about 15 minutes or so to warm up. And if after that half mile, if I haven't warmed up, then I may stop and put on an additional layer. But chances are, after about 15 minutes or that half mile, I'm probably warming up pretty good, and I'm probably okay to go. The second thing about that camping up is the most important layer in this whole setup. And this is going to come as a surprise to you. And I don't have an example with me, but the most important layer is the plastic bag that I put all these clothes in. When I pack up, my sleeping bag and all of these extra clothes go in the plastic bag to stay dry. So through the course of the day, if it either rains or I have some catastrophe going across a stream and I go into the water, none of that gets wet. So it's a guarantee that at the end of the day, I have a dry sleeping bag and I have dry layers to put on. Okay, that does it for my layering system. What do you do for your layering system that's different from mine? I would love to hear suggestions or comments or even criticisms. Let me hear what you do that's different. Also, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I'm videoing over here.